That scares me every time. I'll never get used to that. Hi everyone. My name is Kerri and I am the founder of Jersey Collective, and this is Jersey Collective Reads, which is our monthly book club series that we do where we highlight a different book that either takes place in New Jersey or is about something related to New Jersey. And tonight we're very excited to talk about Action Park. So yeah, that's me. And then Courtney, do you want to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Courtney Preiss. I am a writer. I live in Asbury Park. I have a debut novel coming out in about a year that takes place in Asbury Park. Love New Jersey books, love talking about New Jersey books. Big fan of the book that we're about to discuss. And I grew up in a household that was just constantly cycling through stories of Action Park. My parents were attendees back in the day. So really, really excited to talk to Andy and Jake about, the book and the history.
So Andy and Jake, do you want to briefly introduce yourselves as well?
Go ahead, Jake.
Hey, Andy, how's it going?
Good.
You want to go first?
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I'm Jake. I'm the co-author of Action Park. I'm not from New Jersey. I live in upstate New York. So I remember seeing commercials for Action Park growing up, but to me, it was always this sort of like mythological place. You know, nobody in my family was going to drive me to Action Park. So I only knew it from these commercials. And then as I got older, started to see more and more mention of it, you know, online and going to the Wikipedia page and just being, I think like a lot of people, you know, intrigued by this place that really seemed to exist outside of any
Wouldn't have been the success that it is. One thing when I had to find a great writer to help me tell the story, and I can't tell you how wonderful it was to have Jake do it, because it was really funny initially when we started out early on, and we did the first couple chapters, and I showed him my wife, and she's like, "Oh my God, this is not what you want. This is so wrong." And it was the first draft of the first chapters, and you know, we worked through it, and by like the sixth or seventh chapter, Jake was totally speaking my, you know, it was like he was talking my language and my telling the story. He got into the rhythm. So I wouldn't have had the success that I did with the book without Jake. But who am I? I am a 6-year-old guy that is working towards retirement. I'm a developer. I'm very inspired by my father, who taught me about how to create wonderful things for people to entertain them. And so I've been involved in doing golf courses and hotels and resorts for my career and housing. And the Action Park was something I just fell into because it was my dad that did it as a young guy, and spent, I don't know, 10 years of my childhood and early adulthood working there, and learned a lot. And everyone has a story about Action Park, but my family has dozens of stories. And when I saw Johnny Knoxville was going to do a movie inspired by it, I was thinking about writing a book forever. And finally, I'm like, I got to do it. And so I did it. He told the story, and it was great because so many times over the years, the story was told by the media, and I could not control that. But now, finally, when I got to write a book, I could control what the story was and tell from my perspective. And it's really satisfying. It was great. It was a lot of fun. So I'm really happy to be here and help you guys understand what we did, and ready to answer any questions.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks so much for being here. My internet briefly cut out before, so I don't know if you mentioned how the two of you connected, or if that was not explicitly how you and Jake met each other.
We started to like scratch the surface of it. Yeah, I'd love
I wasn't
to
sure.
hear. I'd love to hear more about how you guys connected, and how this sort of process of co-authoring went about. I guess before we get into more park specific questions, I'd love to hear more about the process of how this book actually came to be.
Well, as I said, I decided I wanted to write the book, and I decided I needed someone to help me write it if it was going to be great. So I went out and I said, well, who's written about Action Park? And I searched around and I found Jake, and he had written some pretty clever things and insightful things about it. So I contacted him, and we started talking about what he had done, and his resume was off the charts. He had written for some tremendous periodicals and magazines, and had done great work. And I felt real comfortable with him right away. And we generally what we did is we kind of worked out a deal. I said, so Jake, what do you want to get paid to do this? He gave me a number. And then we said, I think he helped me along with this. We put a book pitch together, and we went out to the market to see if someone wanted to give us an advance to write the book. And through his contacts, we were fortunate enough to find a editor at Penguin Random House that wanted to do it, and they gave us an advance, which I was able to pass on to Jake to get this thing to happen. And there was no looking back. He was the right guy, and I'm thankful that I got to work with him. I mean, is that how it happened, Jake? Pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, I had written a piece about Action Park for Mental Floss, which is a site I still work for. And I spoke to Andy for that piece. And in the course of writing it, I think I was getting a sense that there was a much bigger story than I could really tell in an article, or a piece of web content. And the more I learned about Andy and his family, and just as he said before, there's so many people have been to Action Park, but Andy's family is really the story. It was theirs, and that was a perspective that you could just never ever replicate or get anywhere else. I mean, that's we thought a book was the best way to tell this story, and there's a process of putting a proposal together and trying to explain to other people why it's a viable idea. And we landed with Penguin, and had a great editor. And in terms of the work process, it's I mean, it's funny that Andy mentions the first couple of chapters. There's a process you have to go through where you're trying to find the right tone and the right kind of voice. And I remember early on, maybe after the first chapter or whatever, Andy calling me up going, is this what we talked about? Is this what we're doing? But that's just kind of a necessary piece of it. And the more you talk and the more you drill down, I think the easier it gets, and eventually you arrive at a point where you're in sync with one another. So yeah.
Yeah, I love how Andy described earlier that like after by whatever chapter, like by the sixth chapter, like your voices had kind of merged and you were writing as one. Like I love to hear about that kind of stuff. I want to piggyback a little bit off of Jake, what you had said about this really being Andy's family story. and just jump into talking about Jean, who is obviously such a central and vital character in the book, and Andy, obviously, in your life. This book did such a wonderful job of painting a really nuanced portrait of him, both in his public life and within his family dynamic. I got a really clear sense of the like Jean logic and this big ambition that turned him into a New Jersey icon. And then like the other side of the coin is we get, you know, the father and the Marine who, you know, counted the town's priest among his closest confidants. He really came alive on the page as one of those characters who I kept thinking, like, if I was reading about this character in a novel or in some work of fiction, people would be like, this is an unbelievable character. So I was curious about, you know, sort of the process around distilling such a big character and such a big personality onto the page. You guys did such a great job at it. If there were challenges surrounding that, yeah, anything around the process of really thoroughly documenting Jean.
Well, if I can give it a shot, Jake, I think it really started with the stories, right? So I had all these stories, and I think I wrote them all down and gave them to Jake, and then kind of outlined what we wanted to cover, themes that were important to me, characteristics of the various people involved that I wanted to have expressed. You know, and we had to, you know, we organized it. You know, the wonderful thing is that Jake never was, would challenge me, but he's never like trying to tell a different story, tell his story. He's trying to tell our story, which I thought was great. And look, I loved my father. I admired my father, and he was an incredible guy. And it was, we had so much material to talk about him. And I was able to guide the, you know, the story to, you know, have it express my viewpoints as to who he was. And I tried to be honest about it. I tried to, you know, express the not so great things and the great things, which certainly overshadowed the not so great things. And I mean, really, it's, you know, it's the action park story, but it's really the Jean Mulvihill story. And I was, as I said, Jake helped me express that. We'll see if when Hulu makes the series, whether they get it or not, and they do it the right way, we shall see. The first draft, Jake and I weren't so happy with, and we expressed what we needed to do, but we can get into that a little bit later.
I mean, you know, Jean.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, Jean is a wonderfully complex person, you know, and as a writer, you're always looking for people who you know have dimension, and I think when you know you read a little bit about Jean or you hear about Jean, it's very easy to develop a sort of cartoon version of him. He's this, you know, bombastic guy, and he's got these big ideas, and you know that's fun for a few pages, but you know there was just so much more to him than that, and it was just very it was very rewarding, and I don't want to say easy, but I mean Jean was just, he's a fascinating guy, and what we always wanted to do in the book is make sure that his personality was being accurately reflected, and that he wasn't just becoming sort of this, you know, oh, every few pages, you know, here comes Jean to you know agitate people. He was, you know, he was incredibly ambitious and incredibly smart. And it's just hard to conceive of this book or this story, you know, without him. I mean, we've seen in popular culture, all these stories of, a kid goes to work at an amusement park for the summer and he falls in love and there's a bully and etc. But this dynamic of, Andy's father being the man behind the park and having all these ideas, and then Andy and his family are sort of tasked with realizing them, is to me what makes this story really, really special. And yeah, I mean, I was as a writer to have someone like Gene is a blessing.
Let me just add on to that. One of the fun things that has happened, since his passing and since the stories are being told, is when Johnny Knoxville decided that he actually saw the Mashable video that was done, a mini documentary before the HBO documentary. Someone sent it to him. He's like, I got to make this. And I heard he was making it, and I couldn't believe he hadn't reached out. So I'm lucky that I have a friend in Hollywood who's an actor, and called him up and said, how do I get Knoxville on the phone? And he says, you wouldn't believe it. Our kids go to school together. I see him like every other day. So he arranged a call, and it wasn't whether I could get Knoxville on the phone. After a while, it was like I couldn't get him off the phone. Unfortunately, he had written his script already and was in the process of preparing to make his movie when we talked, because I think I could have helped them, because the movie ended up bombing. But the really cool thing about the whole Knoxville thing is, I mean, here is, at a time, he was the crazy, stunt ride guy of the world, right? He started the whole YouTube crazy stuff. And the fact that he was going to effectively honor my father by making a movie, kind of based upon what he had done, was pretty cool. What was really cool is when, after he made the movie and he was being interviewed to promote the movie by guys like Jimmy Fallon and et cetera, he goes on these shows, and inevitably they all ask him the same thing. They say, so you made this movie based on Action Park, and there was this guy, Gene Mulvihill, and he was kind of a nutty guy, maybe an unsavory character. How did you think about that? And Knoxville every time would say, no, you don't understand. Gene Mulvihill was a genius. What he did was unbelievable. And it's so funny because when I had him on the phone and I would be talking to him, he's like, you mean you could really jump off the cliff jump and like land on somebody's head and he didn't care? And it was just, Knoxville, right? He's the crazy guy, the crazy stunt guy, the crazy ride guy, the apex of it, saying how much he admired my father. I mean, I don't know, maybe that's kind of crazy for me to check the box and say what a wonderful thing, but it was pretty cool. And what a wonderful guy Knoxville was. Such a gentleman.
That's cool. Yeah, I want to get back to the Hulu thing in a second too, because I didn't know about that. That's interesting. Definitely have questions there. But first I wanted to ask, I'd imagine, Andy, that like your whole lifetime, people probably want to tell you all their stories whenever they find out, that you worked there and this family connection. I'm sure a lot of people, want to tell you all their unsolicited stories about Action Park. Is there any, and I'm sure once the book came out, that probably even increased, I would have to guess. Are there any stories that really stood out to you over the years that people told you? And also, what's it like if your recollections or your feelings on things like don't square with what, things that people want to talk to you about? I don't know if that's frustrating for you at all to deal with.
I'll get to the second part second, but first, so actually all over the world, I mean, I'd be like in Ireland doing like at a wedding, and there'd be some guy like, yeah, I was in New Jersey, and he would have an Action Park story. All the time I'd hear it. And then I'd run into people. In fact, there was a guy the other day that works for us now in our banquet business. He like pulled me aside. I had never met the guy. And he was telling me how wonderful Action Park was and how much he loved working there. But the thing that always stood out was pretty much every kid that worked there, they all said the same thing, which was it was like the greatest job I ever had. I had so much fun there. And that's just, it's a wonderful thing to hear. And because it was my dad and the place he created, but it was also his kids and the kind of environment that we tried to create. What was the second part of the question again?
The second part was just like, are there times when maybe things people want to talk to you about or stories that people are sharing or questions they have like don't always match up with what your experiences were or your
Yeah.
feelings were? And is that like a
Yeah.
frustrating thing?
So well, my agenda in writing the book was to tell the story. It wasn't to try to tell an imaginary story or sugarcoat it. It was to tell the story as best as I could remember it. And absolutely, there were after the book was out, there were a couple people that said, "Oh man, you got that wrong," and I did. I got it wrong. Like the Cannonball Loop, the guy that actually built it was Dick Corral, and I didn't talk to his wife, but my sister's friends with her daughter, and she's like, "No, it was Dick's idea," and maybe it was. I mean, I don't know. I remember is my dad drawing a sketch, but maybe Dick had given him the idea. Tommy and Nancy Smith, they were like big players. They were big characters at the wave pool. Tommy's the first head lifeguard there. And they actually did not want to participate when we were putting the book together. They wouldn't take any interviews because they both have small businesses in the area and they were concerned. I came to find out later because I ran into them in the Cabo airport like a year or two ago. And they were great friends. They're still great friends. And they said, we're so sorry we didn't participate. We're concerned about how it might affect our businesses. And then we talked and yeah, Andy, you got some things really wrong, but man, you got most of it right. So we're good with that. So I'm okay that I didn't get it all right. You do the best you can. And it's if we do another printed edition, Jake, you're going to have to edit some things. I'm sorry, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, that's like the interesting thing about writing a memoir, right? Is that it's your memories and it's your story, and everyone remembers things differently or had different experiences with it. So it's true as best you remember it. One of the other questions I had kind of along these lines for both of you, one thing I really admired about the book was how you balanced, I think you nailed the balance between all of the, humorous and absurdity and all of those kind of anecdotes with also acknowledging some of the heavier and more somber aspects to the history of the park. And I think you did a really good job with that. How did you work together on striking that balance and working that out? What was that like?
I don't know, Jake, what do you think?
Well, I don't think either one of us was interested in telling some sort of intellectually dishonest, version of the Action Park story. I think from the very beginning, we knew that while it would, predominantly be this kind of exhilarating, you're back in this park. There were things that happened that, it wasn't always necessarily fun for everybody, and there were a handful of things that happened that you have to acknowledge as part of the park's history. But I don't think there was never any real discussion of let's minimize this or let's avoid this. It's part of the story of the park. I mean, no one's life is going to be from start to finish nothing but positivity and good days. So there was never any time that I can recall where Andy was ever like, let's skip this, or I mean the book works because it's honest, and I wouldn't have been interested in telling this sort of sanitized version, but I really feel like the episodes in the park that that were tragic or that were harmful on some level have I think at times have been kind of blown out of proportion. And I say that with great respect for, the people affected by it. But when you have a park that's admitting however many people would go through there in the summer, a few 100,000 people, as Andy has mentioned, and as we may have mentioned in the book, it's like, it's kind of like a little city. And in a little city, most people are going to be okay. A couple are going to have, some issues. There's going to be an emergency over here. There's going to be an issue over there. I think the park's reputation turns those episodes into they kind of grow in stature over time. But yeah, I mean, we never. I don't think there was any version of this book where we would just try and minimize that stuff. We tried to get into it as much as we could.
Yeah,
You
that
guys-
makes sense.
I would add that, I was comfortable telling about the bad things because I never thought that my father was guilty of uncaring and doing things that were so reckless and irresponsible that I'd be shamed over it. I never felt that, maybe I've got a little bit of a convoluted perspective on that. But I never felt that way. And then also, being pragmatic, I realized that the tantalizing stuff is what helped make the story interesting and spectacular. I mean, look at the title, the world's most dangerous amusement park. So we were, I wasn't afraid to show that and put that front and center, because ultimately I didn't think that it was something to be ashamed of. Did we make mistakes and were people, found in circumstances which were tragic? Yeah, that was terrible, but it's kind of life, Take a city block with 10,000 people. Look at what goes on during the summer. People slip in their tub and hit their head and die. I mean, it happens. One might even say that the fact that we had EMTs there, and can't tell you the number of people that probably had heart attacks, that we probably saved their lives by providing treatment for them because we had the EMTs and ambulances there. So not something that we, were afraid to shy away from. I'll say though that the editor, he softened up my character a bit. There were certain things where I was actually very forthcoming, and he's like, nah, we don't quite want to go there. We want your character to be likable. And the only so I've done a ton of interviews in the book, and the only time I really got challenged on my behavior was by NPR, and it was about the Surf Hill. And in the Surf Hill story, so the Surf Hill was a ride that was like a big wrestling mat with lanes on it, with coated in vinyl with water running down. You got on a mat and you went down it, and a couple lanes had jumps, and at the bottom, to slow you down, you hit the water, and it often would peel your bathing suit off. And it was not discriminatory. It didn't pick certain people. It picked anybody to take their bathing suit off. And we ended up building like a place for people to sit and watch, not just people losing their bathing suits, but just to watch the whole antics of the thing. And NPR's like, oh, so your father built a place for people to sit and watch young girls lose their bathing suits. And I was like, no, that was not it. Yeah, did that happen? Yeah, it was part of what happened. But it's interesting that he didn't actually use that part of the interview when they put it out. But that was probably the most I got challenged. I know you didn't ask about this, but I'm offering it during the interviews about the book and the challenges. Oh, other than Adam Carolla, he was real swift. I was actually disappointed because I don't think he had read the book when he interviewed me. He didn't. He did a shitty job, I think. But he actually said something pretty kind of funny. He said, so this wave pool was a pretty dangerous place, right? I'm like, yeah. And he says, so where's your father? I'm like, well, he's passed. And Adam Carolla says, what, did he drown and die in the wave pool? That was a little much, but kind of funny anyway.
We love the candor, and certainly appreciate the balance that the two of you brought to the book. Again, you know, mixing obviously so much levity and absurdity with, you know, being able to balance all of that with the more somber moments and with the more serious stories. I know, Andy, you had mentioned earlier, you know, this was really the first opportunity for, you know, you had wanted to write this book because this was the first opportunity for you to tell the story and for the story to come directly from your family, because the story that had been told so long was just from the media. And we get little snippets of, you know, like newspaper headlines or pieces of articles throughout the book, which were juxtaposed really nicely with the chapters that followed. I also, while we're talking about more of the sort of like incident end of it, there's a part where you guys talk about, I think there's actually a couple of parts where you guys talk about incidents at Disney parks, which was just a really interesting juxtaposition. And I think like some much needed perspective, and just really highlights, you know, like how the reputation of different amusement parks kind of defines that media story. I think that there were, you know, specific allusions to, you know, somebody dying on the America Sings ride, and all of these types of things that people don't really talk about with Disney World. I'm not sure if you mention it in the book, but there's actually like a rule at Disney World, like nobody dies on Disney property. Like they make sure that like they fly people off of Disney property before anyone is ever declared dead. Like there's so much around that, and you never really, like Disney, I just feel like Disney never really gets flack for that. There's not really like a big conversation around those sorts of incidents happening, and then Action Park like absorbs all of this reputation, and it, you know, there's like an instant connotation when you hear the name, when you see these colors, you know, like you have the, like you said, the subtitle, the untold story of America's most dangerous amusement park. You guys did a really, yeah, striking job at juxtaposing those sorts of different theme parks. I wanted to pivot a bit, maybe to some lighter fare. I'm curious to know, for both of you, probably Andy, this might be a bit more for you. Do you have a piece of, like a favorite piece of memorabilia that you've kept from the park, like some kind of, I don't know, souvenir or unofficial souvenir that you've kept from back in the day that's like special to you?
I mean, it's really the memories and the friendships that are most special to me. You know, I think I still have my name tag when I was running Water World. I think I have some old uniform shirts. But you know, as you get older, you realize that that stuff's not what is important. It's the friends, the friendships that I have. You know, when we were invited to Knoxville's opening, I was invited to Knoxville's opening of his movie. I invited like buddies that I had worked at Action Park with. We flew out there, and it's really, that's what I embrace, and I embrace, you know, my family members and our common heritage with that. And we, you know, it's a nonstop part of our lives, part of the history of who we are, that we all are very comfortable with, and you know, and look fondly on it. So I think really that's what I hold as memorabilia for me. Oh, I can tell you though that I did go to a buddy of mine from Action Park, I don't know, maybe 5 years ago. So this is like 25 years after the park closed. He lives on a lake community not far from Action Park, and he pulls out some tubes with the Action Park logo that he must have lifted when he worked for us, but he still had them, and he blew them up and he brought them. I hadn't seen him in a while, so we had a lot of fun with the fact that he had Action Park tubes there. That was kind of fun.
I was actually wondering specifically about the tubes. I watched a bunch of commercials that I found on YouTube after I finished reading the book, and was just like, I wonder what happened to all of those tubes, or if they'll ever, I don't know. That would be like a fun thing to try and remake. Um, yeah, I have like a couple of more goofy questions. Kerri, did you want to take a different one before I jump into those?
No, you can do the goofy questions because then
Okay.
maybe we'll do audience questions after that. So that'll work, I think.
Okay, great. Just gonna stick to one goofy one, and then maybe we'll talk about like the media, like the Hulu. I want to hear more about the Hulu adaptation as well. So before we get into that, I'm curious if you could bring back one action park ride for one weekend only, which one would it be?
Well, certainly the most iconic was the Cannonball Loop. But that ride wasn't any fun. It was kind of like a ride you survive, get in it and go down it and like get disoriented and thrown all around. It didn't feel good. But I guess there was the Alpine slide was a great ride. And there's still Alpine slides around. We had one in Colorado that survived past the action park. My dad had a little amusement park out there, and I ran that after he died. Had somebody run it for me, but that got closed. But the Alpine slide was great. The flying ride, where you would step into an airstream created by a DC-8 engine, and you would fly in a suit. That's cool. And they have them indoors. That was a really fun ride. I like that. But probably the most fun ride, I think, was Surf Hill with the jump. So it was, to me, I mean, I'm not so much anymore because I'm 60, but I was a pretty athletic guy, and I loved doing everything outdoors, mountain biking and downhill skiing, and you name it, we did it. And going down a mountain on a mat and hitting like a ski jump, but that's a water slide, and depending upon how you hold yourself and how you push off depends on how much air you can get. But you would fly through the air, and it was a steep landing and very well padded, so it didn't really hurt to land. But that was like really exhilarating, and it was very athletic. And to me, that was an awesome ride. And there were guys that would go up there and spend the whole day just on that one ride because it was so much fun. We didn't have the jump. We had it for a while, but then we got rid of it. I remember I took some of my college buddies there, and you could adjust the jump. We went there at night after the place was closed and opened it, and I adjusted the jump real high to kind of like show these guys how crazy it could be. And I said, but only go halfway up. And one of my friends went all the way up, and he hit it. I thought he was going to die. He was this wiry, tough guy. Thank God he survived. But no, Surf Hill was a great ride. I love that ride.
Jake, are you a rides person? Is there a ride that you wish you could have experienced?
No, I'm not much of a ride person. I think in talking to Andy and everyone else, I think I got most curious about Surf Hill because it seemed to me to be something akin to skateboarding, where you can sort of bring a lot of your own creativity into the ride. And I always thought that sounded like probably one of the best things that was at the park. I'd probably be most curious to try that.
Kerri, which ride would you go on if you could?
I am not a rides person at all.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would probably be like way too scared to go on almost any of these things.
Maybe like a bumper boat. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, no, I like water parks, but I don't like heights. So yeah, I don't know. If there was like a lazy river, I would have done that.
How about driving a race car? Those were fun.
Yeah, I'm not much of like an adrenaline junkie. I think I would have been like the kid like in the corner, like eating snack bar food. That would have been me.
See, the lazy river is sneakily dangerous because
That's true, yeah.
you'll be drifting along and then you'll get caught under one of those like big waterfalls and you'll just like stick there and spin. Lazy river's treacherous.
Yeah, very treacherous. Sorry, come on, you kidding me?
I would prefer to go on something that like I know is treacherous instead of something that sounds like the lazy river and I'm coming off with like a sore neck. Um, yeah, I would love to talk to you guys a little bit more about the Hulu adaptation, which I did not know is happening. Um, and just about, you know, we've covered off on some of like the Johnny Knoxville movie, which, you know, that's great that you guys were able to connect over it. It sounds like it could have been even better if he had found you a little bit earlier and written some of your anecdotes into the script. But yeah, is there like, obviously that documentary came out on HBO Max, I believe, a year or two ago. Do you have, you know, a favorite piece of media surrounding the park that's come out? What's the process been like working with Hulu? When can we expect to see something maybe?
So the HBO Max thing, Seth Porges is the producer of that, and he had done a short form documentary for Mashable. And it was, I think he did it when we got the amusement park back, so we wanted publicity. So I sat for an interview with him, and it actually turned out pretty good. I was pretty happy with it. And then, you know, some years went on, and he approached me and he said, "Hey, I want to do a documentary about Action Park, make a movie." And I was writing the book at the time, and I said, "Why don't you wait until I finish my book and let's try to make a movie about the book?" And he said, "No, no, 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 I want to make the documentary." I said, "Well, I'm going to hold off for me to do the book and then try to make a movie about it." So he went about making it, and he couldn't sell it. He made it and he couldn't sell it. And he wanted me to invest with him. His budget was 50 grand. I was like, what is he going to make for 50 grand? Didn't intrigue me too much. Couldn't sell it. And then he approached me again. He says, I want you to be in it. And I said, well, let me have a look at it. And he wouldn't show it to me, what he had done. So that kind of put my radar up, and I said, I think I'm going to pass. And anyway, I think COVID hit. There was a lack of material. HBO Max made a deal with him, and I think it got pretty good play, and I think it got good number of eyeballs on it. There was a lot of great stuff in it. My interview in it wasn't actually authorized, and I could have probably fought him on it, but life's only so long. And I wasn't really happy about the way he portrayed my father, and the fact that the one young guy, that employee that rode the slide when it was raining, when it was closed, and actually got hurt and died. When his parents came home, they have a scene where the parent comes home and said, this is years after the kid died, and it was the day my father had died, and they said, hey, break out the champagne, Gene Mulvihill's dead. I thought that wasn't very classy, so I was disappointed with that. But the interesting thing about the rest of the thing is that what you can't, like, you can't edit, or you can't turn one way or the other, is you just watch the people and all the footage. They're all having a great time. And so I enjoyed seeing all of that. But anyway, so I passed on that. I think he did okay with it. And, we had finished the book, and then we went out to shop the book to see if someone wanted to make a movie. And it's pretty quiet initially. We had a guy through my book agent. He found me a Hollywood agent. I wasn't real happy with the guy's resume. I wasn't happy with what he was doing. I'm like, we got to get rid of this guy. Just as we're about to get rid of him, he brings us an offer. And I was kind of like, I don't know, should I get rid of the guy? He's bringing me an offer. And then like 2 days later, he brought me another offer. And then 3 days later, another offer. All of a sudden, we had like 10 offers to do something with the book. And which was pretty exciting, because there's really not a lot of money in the book. You got to be Oprah Winfrey or Shaquille O'Neal with that kind of name recognition to sell a lot of books. I think we've sold something like 25 or 30,000 books. But you want to make some money, you got to sell like 100, 200, 300, 1 million books. Then you really start making some money. But the money can be made on selling the rights to the book to make a show. And we ended up settling on Hulu, 20th Century Fox and Hulu. So 20th Century Fox is the producer, and Hulu is actually the distributor. they're both Disney companies. It's unusual to be able to get both in one swipe. Usually it's the producers or the end user that buys it, and then they have to find the other guy. But we had both of them, which is great. And we made a deal. I think Jake was happy with, and I was happy with. The way these things work is it's an option initially, where they kind of like they tell you, you negotiate the deal. You know you're going to get paid if they make it, but they're able to tie it up and try to put it together for a small percentage of the overall price. And so they provided us that option payment, and then they had an extension, which was done. And it comes due, I think, this spring, early summer, where they either have to buy the book outright, or they got to actually pay us a big exit fee. But what I'm really excited about, it's kind of a mixed bag. When you sell your rights, for me, for my little book and Jake's little book, when you sell your rights, you have no control over what they're going to do with it. They're simply, look, we're going to be investing a ton of money. We're going to do with it what we please. So you're not happy about that, that I can't control that. But the great thing is these guys have hired a writer that's unbelievable. A guy, Rob Siegel. Rob Siegel he just finished doing the new Chippendale series on, I think, Hulu. And he had done the Tommy Lee, Pam Anderson series, which was, it's not really my kind of stuff, but really wonderfully accepted and well done. He wrote The Wrestler starring Mickey Rourke, which was a great movie. And he did The Founder starring Michael Keaton about the Ray Kroc and the McDonald's story. So they've got an awesome writer. And I actually Jake, I was actually on the phone with him again this past week answering questions. He's on his 4th draft now. Jake and I saw the first draft, and we were not super excited. Maybe, Jake, you could talk to it, and we kind of gave some comments. You only can go so far, but hopefully they end up doing something with it. But even if they don't and they get it back, I don't know, maybe I'll raise the money and do something the way I want. We'll see. But it'll be fun, even if the story's not quite told the way I want it to be told, to have it distributed, as a series. It could be a lot of fun. Jake, any thoughts, Jake?
I think there's some interesting, I don't know if you'd call it like symmetry or something, and having Disney, mounting this production. Gene, would every now and again talk about his ambitions to build something akin to Disney World, and to have it, to have the book wind up at Disney, I was always kind of funny to me. But it's a television show, a movie, whatever it is, they can prioritize different things, and sometimes the story they want to tell gets simplified or what have you. But Rob is a really, really good writer, and I think there's huge potential in the show. You have a place that you can really tell any kind of story because all sorts of things are going on. And you have a very eclectic cast of characters, and a lot of different scenarios. I think the one thing, and I think Rob brought this up at some point with Andy, is that, the problem, so to speak, is there are a lot of different ways you can do this. There's a lot of different tones you can have and a lot of different approaches. And it's a matter of figuring out which one is best for the show. So, of course, I'm looking forward to seeing what they do. And, if it doesn't wind up happening at Hulu, it's kind of a big world out there. So I imagine there are other people who kind of see what's possible. But I would love to see it realized with Rob and the people at Hulu. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's exciting. Really cool. Looking forward to seeing how that all comes together or what
He
happens.
sounds like the perfect person to write the adaptation, honestly. So fingers crossed.
All right, cool. Well, we don't want to take up too much of your time, but we have a couple minutes left yet. So if anyone has any questions, let me change it so that people can unmute. Okay, so if anyone has any questions for Andy or Jake, feel free to shout it out now. Somebody's got to have a question. No? Yeah, I made it so you can unmute. I was like making sure I did that properly. Okay, well, I'll ask another question then if no one has a question. Let me see. Are either of you able to go to an amusement park and enjoy the experience, or are you constantly, so I'm a librarian as my day job, so like when I go into another library, I'm like looking at how they do things and like, can you do that with an amusement park too, or do you get to actually enjoy yourself?
Are you working, you're figuring out which books to ban based upon other
Oh
libraries?
no, I just like to see like how do they sticker their books or like what kind of flyers do they make? It's very
You
dorky.
know, I'm actually I'm on the New Jersey State Board of Education and knee deep in all of the controversial stuff going on, but that's a different story for another day. When I go to, so we're in the hotel business now, in the golf business and the banquet business and the restaurant business. So really hospitality. And when I go to various places, I'm an observer. You know, I observe what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong. Try to find, it's, to me, it's really awesome to like discover somebody that's come up with a creative new idea. I always find that to be the most exciting thing. Seeing things run well, knowing how hard it is to run things well, I really respect. Seeing people make, you know, just major blunders left and right. It's like I walk through a place, I'm like, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong, that's wrong. It's just how I was trained. My father always used to say about the place, he's like, you know, when you're in Disney World, wherever you look, it looks perfect. You know, it's like you're on, think, Andy, that you're on a stage at a Broadway play, and you wouldn't have a pile of crap lying there or somebody wearing the wrong uniform over there. You got to think about it as a stage. So I always, when I look at places, I think about it that way. I'm like, how are they getting this right? How are they creating the right scene? And I just have a very critical eye for their places and even our place. I like the other day I walked into the front of one of our golf lodges, and it was like the front door, it was like beat up, and I took a bunch of pictures to my sister. I'm like, this isn't right. We got to fix this. So yeah, I've got a very critical eye when I go around.
Yeah, I mean, for me, my answer is going to be pretty different because I wasn't running an amusement park. You know, I'm not able to see things in that way. For me, it's more about you know, thinking about what I want to do next in terms of writing. Usually, my question is, well, is this story as interesting as Action Park was? You know, is it going to motivate me to write a book and have that eat up a couple of years of your life? With Action Park, the answer was yeah, and there wasn't even a question. I mean, this was such a rich, fascinating story that I mean, it was just an immediate, if we can do it, let's do it. But the downside to that is, you know, it's hard to find subjects and assignments or projects that can kind of live up to that, you know. So you're kind of in a position where you're looking for something that can excite you in that way, and those stories are, you know, they're hard to come by. They don't come along very often, and I feel really fortunate and really thankful to Andy and his family that I was able to help in the telling of that story. You know, because I just think it's, you know, terrific.
And same back your way, Jake. As I've said, and I hope I've said enough here, is without your wittiness and your humor, it's just the fact. I mean, when I decided to do I was like full speed ahead. I'm doing this book. I'm not going to spend forever finding the right writer. I think this guy's good enough, but my God, your humor just fit my family's humor. And it was, I don't know, it was like maybe divine providence. I don't know, but thank you again, Jake. Thanks for what you did with us.
Yeah, well, thank you.
I'm so moved by this. I want to just, I know that we're at the end of time, give everyone just one last quick second if they wanted to ask a quick question. And I think I saw someone come off mute.
Yeah, I was just wondering do you think an iteration of Action Park could exist today in 2023? And if so, what would it look like?
Well, I kind of had a taste of that when we bought the place back. Well, I don't know, it was like 5 years ago or 7 years ago, maybe even more than that. It was like 10 years ago. We had it again for a couple of years, and we tried to, and the place was a shell of its original self, because a big Canadian company had got rid of most of the fun rides and the Kerri ride, and so kind of flirted with trying to bring things back. And I remember I got this ride, which was a huge blow up ride, like a jumpy park, but it was a water slide jump. So you went down a this airbag thing with a slide, and you flew through the air and landed in an airbag, and it was really cool. It was pretty safe, but we tested it, and our one of our employees, a middle-aged woman, got hurt her neck. Had I don't know, 30 people that went, and I'm thinking, it's not going to work. This person got hurt, because whenever you put somebody in the air, 1 out of 100, 1 out of 1,000, they're going to get hurt. It just happens. And so in today's day and age, it can't happen. But that said, there's some guys in Texas that took an idea from a ski area, no, a ski training facility, where they took skiers that would go down in the summer down a slide or a hill and fly through the air and land in a pond. And they changed it so you could do that on a mat, as a water slide. And there's guys in Texas that put it in, and people fly like so high in the air. It's like this would have been a super duper Action Park ride. So guys are doing it. I know people are getting hurt there. I don't know how they're surviving the liability of it. I think that if you really wanted to do it again, what you'd have to do is, you couldn't call it an amusement park. You'd have to call it an adventure park. I mean, look at mountain biking, people going downhill mountain biking and going off of jumps. People are doing crazy stuff, they're hang gliding, the bungee jumping. It's still going on, but it's not going on the confines of an amusement park. So I think if you were going to do something, you'd have to do it as like an adventure center, and you'd have to get them to sign their life away and have amazing insurance. But you could never do an amusement park like that again.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see that happening. But I think I've mentioned this to Andy before. I do feel like, with the Disney thing, like if the show is a hit and if it resonates with people, we live in this sort of multimedia world where companies are constantly looking at new channels for their intellectual property. And I don't think it's inconceivable that at some point someone at Disney would go, well, why don't we just build a little mini Action Park at Disney World or something, and we'll homogenize it, we'll Disneyfy it, and people who watch the show can come and kind of have that experience. I don't think that's inconceivable. It's my prediction. So in that form, yes, in its original, I don't see that happening.
I like your thinking, Jake. I like your thinking. That could be fun.
That would be so full circle. It really blew my mind when you guys talked about in the book how Blizzard Beach at Disney World is kind of like, it seems like a very obvious homage to Action Park. I don't know. I guess I learned a lot about Disney reading this book, and Action Park in contrast. Thank you, Lauren, for that question. If anybody has anything else, and if not, we will thank our guests and sign off. Thank you so much, Andy and Jake, for being here. We've been just so excited to talk with you, and we loved the book so much.
Yeah, thank you. It was great meeting you. And for everybody who attended, some of you, I know I spoke to some of you that you read the book and enjoyed it. And some of you, I don't know if you read it or not, because I don't know everyone in the meeting, but if you have not read it, highly recommend. Very, very
It's
good.
also a great audio book. Not to
I know someone in the chat listened to it. So.
Yeah, actually, I'll jump in real quick. I do most of my books through audiobooks, and I kind of had a question, I guess, you were talking about the Hulu show and the, talking to Johnny Knoxville and everything like that. Do you have a say, or how did you go about picking the narrator for the audiobook? Because it was a really, really good audiobook, and I felt like very it was written in a way that translated well, so I felt like I was actually listening to someone like you tell the story.
We absolutely had the opportunity to pick the speaker who read the book. We went through a lot of different suggestions. Jake, I can't remember how involved you were within that, whether we did it together or not. I can't remember that. I know they asked me if I wanted to do it, and I just, again, I'm like, let's hire a professional. So I passed on the idea, but we certainly were able to pick the guy, and I think we got the right voice. I don't know that he was perfect, but Jake, I forget how involved you were. Were you with me on making that or picking that guy?
Yeah. My recollection is that our editor, someone at Penguin, had a few options, and they would send us audio of each one. And I think there were little snippets, and we just tried to take our best swing as to who would be the best fit. And I think we found the right person.
Co-sign. That was a great narrator. I have like my fatal flaw is that I like reading the paper book and listening to the audio at the same time, to switch on and off while I'm driving. So got to drive around with my jaw dropped listening to some of these stories. Highly recommend. So yeah, thanks so much again to both of you for joining us, for your time. Thank you to everybody here for your time, for joining us. Kerri, if you want to talk a little bit about the newsletter, maybe I can drop a link in here.
Oh yeah, good idea. If anyone has not attended any of our events or wants to come to any of our events again, we will be announcing soon what the next book is. As I'm typing it, I should have let you do it. I think that's correct. If you just go to jerseycollective.org, you can find it as well. But yeah, if you sign up for the newsletter, that's how you can keep track of all the future Jersey Collective reads and everything else that we do as well. So thank you again, Andy and Jake. It was great meeting you, and thank you everybody for coming, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye, everyone.